The Oversoul, an essay by Waldo Emerson. Man is a stream whose source is hidden. Always our being is descending into us from we know not whence. The most exact calculator has no prescience that something incalculable may not balk at the very next moment. I am constrained every moment to acknowledge a higher origin for events than the will I call mine. As with events, so it is with thoughts. When I watch that flowing river, which, out of regions I see not, pours for a season its streams into me, I see that I am a pensioner, not a cause, but a surprised spectator of this ethereal water. That I desire and look up, and put myself in the attitude of its reception, but from some alien energy the visions come. The supreme critic on all errors of the past and present, and the only prophet of which must be, is the great nature in which we rest. As the earth lies in the soft arms of the atmosphere, that unity, that oversoul, within which every man's particular being is contained, and made one with all other, that common heart, of which all sincere conversation is the worship, to which all right action is submission, that overpowering reality which confutes our tricks and talents, and constrains everyone to pass for what he is, to speak from his character and not from his tongue, and which evermore tends to pass into our thought and hand, and becomes wisdom and virtue and power and beauty. We live in succession, in division, in parts and particles. Meantime within man is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty, to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. This deep power in which we exist, and whose beatitude is all accessible to us, is not only self-sufficing and perfect in every hour, but the act of seeing and the seeing, the seer and the spectacle, the subject and the object are one. We see the world piece by piece, as the sun, the moon, the animal, the tree, but the whole, of which these are shining parts, is the soul. Only by the vision of that wisdom can the horoscope of the ages be read, and by falling back on our better thoughts, by yielding to the spirit of prophecy, which is innate in every man, can we know what it saith. I dare not speak for it. My words do not carry a sogged sense, they fall short and cold. Only itself can inspire whom it will, and behold, their speech shall be lyrical and sweet, and universal as the rising of the wind. Yet I desire even by profane words, if sacred I may not use, to indicate the heaven of this deity, and to report what hints I have collected of the transcendent simplicity and energy of the highest law. All goes to show that the soul in man is not an organ, but animate and exercises all the organs. It's not a function like power of memory, of calculation, of comparison, but uses these as hands and feet. It is not faculty, but a light. It is not the intellect or the will, but the master of the intellect and the will. It is the vast background of our being in which they lie, an immensity not possessed and that cannot be possessed. From within or from behind, a light shines through us, upon things, and makes us aware that we are nothing, but light is all. The man is the facade of a temple, wherein all wisdom and all good abide. Stop. When the universal soul breathes through man's intellect, it is genius. When it breathes through his soul, when it breathes through his will, it is virtue. When it flows through his affection, it is love. And the blindness of the intellect begins when it should be something of itself. The weakness of the will begins when the individual will be something of himself. All reform aims, in some particular, to get the universal soul have its way through us. In other words, to engage us and to obey. To the soul in her action, all the virtues are natural and not painfully acquired. Speak to his heart, and the man suddenly becomes virtuous. Within the same sentiment is the germ of intellectual growth, which obeys the same law. Those who are capable of humility, of justice, of love, of aspiration, are already on a platform that commands the sciences and arts, speech and poetry, action and grace. For whoso dwells in this moral beatitude does already anticipate those powers which men prize so highly, just as love does justice to all the gifts of the object beloved. The heart which abandons itself to the Supreme Mind finds itself related to all its works, and will travel a royal road to a particular knowledge and powers. In ascending to this primary and aboriginal sentiment, we have come from our remote station on the circumference instantaneously to the center of the world, where, as in the closet of God, we see causes, and anticipate the universe, which is but a slow effect. One mode of the divine teaching is in the incarnation of the Spirit in forms like my own. I live in a society with persons who answer to thoughts in my own mind, or express a certain obedience to the great instincts according to which I live. I see its presence in them. I am certified of a common nature, and so these other souls, these separate selves, draw me as nothing else can. They stir me into new emotions we call passion, love, hatred, fear, admiration, pity, and thence comes conversation, competition, persuasion, cities, and war. In all conversation between two parties, tacit reference is made to a third party, to a common nature. That third party or common nature is not social, is not impersonal, is God. And so in groups where debate is earnest, and especially on the high questions, the company becomes aware that thought rises to an equal level in the bosoms, that all have a spiritual property in which was said, as well as its air. They all become wiser than they were. It arcs over them like a temple, this unity of thought, in which every heart beats with a nobler sense of power and duty, and thinks and acts with unusual solemnity. All are conscious of attaining to a higher self-profession. It shines for all. There is a certain wisdom of humanity, which is common to the greatest men with the lowest, and which our ordinary and education often labors to silence and obstruct. The mind is one, and the best minds who love truth for its own sake think much less of the property of truth, of owning truth. Thankfully they accept it everywhere, and do not label it or stamp it with any man's name, for it is theirs long beforehand, and is theirs for eternity. The learned and the studious of thought have no monopoly on wisdom. Their violence of direction in some degree disqualifies them to think truly. We owe many valuable observations to people who are not very acute or profound, and who see the thing without effort, which we want to and have long been hunting in vain. The action of the soul is oftener in that which is felt and left unsaid than in which is said in any conversation. It broods over every society, and they unconsciously seek for it in each other. We know better than we do. We do not yet possess ourselves, and yet we know at the same time that we are much more. I feel now the same truth how often my trivial conversations with my neighbors. By something higher in each of us overlooks this play-by-play, and Jove nods Jove from behind each of us. We are wiser than we know, and if we will not interfere with our thought, but will act entirely and see how the thing stands with God, we know the particular thing and everything for every man. For the Maker of all things and all persons stands behind us, and casts his dread omniscience through us over things. There is a difference between 1 hour and another of life in their authority and subsequent effect. Our faith comes in moments, our vice is habitual. Yet is there a depth of those brief moments which constrains us to ascribe more reality to them than all other experiences? We distinguish the announcements of the soul, its manifestations of its own nature, by the term revelation. These are always attended by emotions of the sublime. For this communication is an influx of the divine mind into our own. It is the ebb of the individual rivulet before flowing surges of the sea of life. Every distinct apprehension of this ethereal commandment, central commandment, agitates men with awe and delight. A thrill passes through all men at the reception of new truth, or at the performance of a great action, and comes out of the heart of nature. In these communications, the power to see is separated from the will to do, but the insight proceeds from obedience, and the obedience proceeds from a joyful perception. Every moment when the individual feels himself invaded by it is memorable. By the necessity of our constitution, a certain enthusiasm attends to the individual's consciousness of that divine presence. The character and duration of the enthusiasm varies with the state of the individual, from an ecstasy and trance prophetic inspiration, which is his rarest experience, to the faintest glow of virtuous emotion, in which forms it warms, like our household fires, all the families and associations of men, and makes society possible. It is not an arbitrary decree of God, the nature of man, that a veil shuts down on the facts of tomorrow, for the soul will not have us read any other cipher than that of cause and effect. By this veil, which certain events, it instructs the children of men to live in today. The only mode of obtaining an answer to these questions of the senses is to forego all low curiosity, and accepting the tide of being which floats us into the secret of nature, work and live, and all unawares the advancing soul has built and forged for itself a new condition, and the question and the answer are one. Thus the soul, the perceiver and the revealer of truth, by the same fire, vital, consecrating, celestial, which burns until it shall dissolve all things into waves and surges of an ocean of light, we see and know each other, and what spirit each is of. By virtue of this inevitable nature, private will is overpowered. In spite of our efforts and our imperfections, your genius will speak through you, and of mine from me. That which we are we shall teach, not voluntarily, but involuntarily. Thoughts come into our minds by avenues which we never left open, and thoughts go out of our minds through avenues which we never voluntarily opened.